I identify as biracial or mixed.
So I identify as Asian and Black, but to be fully transparent, it depends on the setting that I'm in, because sometimes my background is so much more complex. Like because I'm international, and there's like a variety of different national makeups of my identity. And so when I'm in a context where I feel like I can explain that without having to go too much in depth, I will identify as Thai, Yemeni, and Ethiopian. And if I'm in a context where people maybe are less familiar with who I am and just need a quick understanding, I'll say I'm half Black, half Asian.
Well, first, I identify as a human being, first and foremost. So based on what this interview is about, with regard to my background and my ethnicity, I identify with all of my parts. I am European with African descent. There is some speculation that I may have some Native American descent, but I'm not sure enough about that to be able to claim it. But I know that I have African blood, I have Irish blood, I have German blood, and I have English blood.
I identify as African American, Puerto Rican female.
Well, it's been a part of my entire life, so I didn't realize there was much of a difference until I was in about fourth grade, maybe third or fourth grade. And I started to notice that I was either too white or I was too Black, and there was never really a space where I was enough unless I was hanging out with other biracial people or with my family. And I really started to realize that in middle school. And so I struggled when I was younger, because even into college, honestly, because I felt like I was two parts, like there were oil and water in me and they weren't mixing and I couldn't get them to mix. And so it was really difficult accepting myself as enough, that I wasn't too white, I wasn't too Black, that I am who I am, and that that's a beautiful and good thing.
So I think a lot of biracial kids / adults can relate to this feeling of not truly having one place, that your holistic being, your DNA makeup, your what you look like, just how you present, where all of that kind of like belongs. And so I think for me, the question was, well, sorry, let me just not say it like that. For me, growing up biracial, there has been a lot of just trying to fit in somewhere, and then slowly realizing that the beauty of being biracial, rather than it being a curse, was that I am who I am. And even though there's not one perfect box or perfect place that I can kind of like fit into in a seamless way, that who I am isn't lacking in a sense of belonging just because of that. But that's definitely affected me as I grew up, just kind of like having to navigate that and understand it and what it means for me in my kind of like day-to-day life activities and relating to other people.
It's affected my life in many ways. In the positive, I feel like I have a little bit of an opportunity to sort of bridge the gap between what's considered to be Black and white. I don't believe in black and white. First of all, Black and white, if you think about the study of color in artistry, are neutrals. Black and white are neutrals. They contain all the other colors. So in the same way, I feel that biracial isn't the way that I express my makeup. I believe that there's a human race. I believe there's an animal race, and in the human race, I think there are ethnicities and cultures, and that's how I see that. On the negative side, I've had exclusion from a lot of different types of people. I've had a lot of questions about what I am. So when you said before, what do I identify with? The question, when it comes from someone else, whether they are of color or they are Caucasian, what are you? Feels offensive, because it doesn't get to the point. What are you just says, you seem like an alien to me.
I would say, for the most part, I never really had any issues. I think only up until I got to maybe like high school, like middle school and high school, when I started realizing that I was different. Sometimes it was only because maybe I was a little too Puerto Rican to hang out with the Black girls and a little too Black to hang out with the Puerto Rican girls. So I kind of had to find my middle ground and find my way, I guess. But other than that, I mean, I didn't have any type of issues. It was more just who I was.
So I think the thing that stuck with me the most doesn't sound that bad, but it really hurt me, was when I was in middle school. Another girl who was biracial had been kind of gossiping, and she was basically, and I think actually she'd said this to my face at one point, and she said, you know, you wouldn't understand, you're too white, you're not really Black. And I think it hurt the most because it was coming from someone who I thought would understand, someone who was biracial. Like, shouldn't she understand me? But I realized that she had bought into the very things that the world had been telling her. And so she was just passing that along. And so it was hurtful at the time, because having someone who's supposed to sort of be like you tell you that you're not enough is just even worse than having someone who isn't like you say that.
I sat down in the cafeteria and somebody, and so this is actually kind of a funny story, because the person that said something mean to me at that time, I was so naive because I hadn't experienced racism growing up until I had come here, and nothing was like it. No level of aggression, whether it's micro or macro, ever reflected what it's like in the US. So somebody at a table said to me something about how I was basically irrelevant because I was a mixed bred, and he was Hispanic, and the table that I was with was mixed company, but people of color. And I remember everybody kind of jumped on him for saying that, but I didn't even identify. I didn't even understand that he was purposely being derogatory towards me. I just, because that's how little I was able to kind of identify mean comments at the time, because I just wasn't used to it. I was used to like the microaggressions, never really the macroaggressions. And so that was one of those moments that really kind of sat with me.
Who gave me the most trouble wasn't necessarily one person, though I do remember one person in high school, upper middle school, actually high school, who bullied me relentlessly. She was a dark brown skinned Black girl who just constantly bullied me, and a couple of times attacked me in the street, not alone, but with a number of friends. And it is actually, in reality, the sad reality is that I've gotten the most grief from Black people who misconstrued me as a wannabe, as wanting to be whiter than I am. I've heard comments like, "You talk white," zebra Oreo, and it early in life, as a child, it made it very difficult for me to embrace my Blackness. And it took a lot of soul searching and a lot of inner work to be able to do that without without hesitation, to be able to be comfortable in who I am. The other side of that coin is that white people, Caucasian people, wouldn't allow me to be Black. "Oh, but you're not really Black," is what was often said to me.
I would definitely say I had the most trouble coming from my African American side, because they were always sure to tell me that I was not a quote unquote Black girl, I guess. I mean, it did just make me feel like I wasn't very accepted, even though I've identified as being one of them and part of them. But again, I think that was more just self-reflecting as far as who I was and knowing where I stood with myself. And then that way, you don't feel, you just tend to grow out of it when you know who you are.
I think it's awesome because we get to mix cultures, get to mix perspectives. It's wonderful. It is sometimes challenging. Like when we go and we travel, especially when we travel in the South, people do stare at my parents a lot, which you wouldn't think it would be that big of a deal. But whenever we go to the South to visit my family, if we go out to a restaurant on a Sunday, they look at my mom funny sometimes if we go to a Black-owned restaurant, because they're wondering, like, why is she hanging out with all of us? And then vice versa, if we go to a really white rural area, they look at my dad like, what are you doing with this woman? And so that's been challenging, but there are more pros than cons. And I think those, even though it is hurtful sometimes to have people stare at you or kind of frown or look at you disapprovingly, it is hurtful, but it's minimal compared to the wonderfulness of having two cultures and I think we get to connect with more people naturally, because we have that double advantage. And I think that's what's really neat about being biracial, is not that I don't think we have the responsibility to be the bridge, but I think we have the option to be a bridge between two races if we choose to.
So coming from a mixed race, mixed national family, I guess mixed nation family, I think it actually was really good for us. We kind of enjoyed being the only this strange little mix of, you know, two completely different people, my mom and my dad, from completely different cultures, completely different religions, completely different backgrounds, completely different, like, how they present aesthetically. And so we kind of had this interesting mix of who we were, and there was really nobody else out there like us or that we knew of. So I would say that it actually made us closer, and it worked really nicely for us. We enjoyed that. We kind of liked being, you know, different from everybody, and that's just maybe our own little family quirks. But it affected my family positively. I would say we definitely appreciated just the diversity that was brought naturally just because my parents decided to get married.
My family is a rainbow of shades. My father was the browner of the two of my mother and he. My mother was very, very fair-skinned and had loose, dark curls. My father was darker than I, but not very, very dark, with freckles and kinky curly hair like mine. And my sister is very fair with freckles, with red hair. So we have a multitude of shades in my family. So that effect has been probably much the same as what I described earlier with those kinds of questions. With regard to farther lineage, my grandfather, my mother's father, who was very fair and looked much, much lighter than I, would make comments like, you know, I came home from being bullied by a Black person and a Black classmate, and I was asking questions about, you know, what our makeup is and what it means and how I should feel about that. And he said, "Erica, we don't have enough Black in us to fill a teacup." And it made an impression on me because it was clear to me that he didn't care to acknowledge the fact that I, having a father who was darker, had more Black in me than he did.
So sometimes I think people, and this is for anybody, but I've had the stereotype that some people will think that I only like white guys because I'm light skinned.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. It doesn't even make sense to me. Like I'm the type of person who I find just about any color, ethnicity, and race attractive. So I don't know where that idea came from, but there is this notion that because I'm light skinned, that I would be only attracted to white males. And that's just not true. Like, I think that all people are beautiful. Sure, there are some white guys that I may be attracted to, but there are also some Black guys, also some Latino dudes. Like, so I think that's one thing that has been weird to me, is for people to assume that I'm going to have a preference. And I think it's strange that they don't assume that maybe I would like more people because I am biracial. But for some reason, I think it is colorism. It's less of a mixed stereotype, I think, and more of a colorism stereotype, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I get a lot of like, oh, you're light skinned, so you don't know what it's really like. Or I get a lot of like, oh, you're probably lazy because you're light skinned, or you probably don't, you know, you're bougie, or you're just a lot, very, because I'm Black, but because I'm mixed, and so I categorize in the Black community as light skinned. I get a lot of stereotypes about kind of like laziness and bouginess and just a certain kind of like prestigious attitude, I guess, from the Black community. Outside the Black community, specifically towards the white community, I get a lot of just like fetishizing, I would call it. A lot of people just saying like, oh, you're so exotic, you're so unique, you're so interesting, like what are you? Kind of treating me a little bit like a really exotic bird at a zoo, in a sense. And so I think the stereotypes come differently depending on what groups I'm interacting with at the time.
Because I speak a certain way, I have been, it's been another way to stereotype me as a wannabe. With, like I said, the comment before, you talk white. I speak the way I was brought up. My father, being 3 shades browner than me, spoke this way as well. So I never understood that. Because I got so much resistance and lack of acceptance from my Black classmates in high school. My first boyfriend was white, and so the stereotype was that I would only date white boys. I did actually eventually end up dating a couple of Black boys, and they were very nice. They were very nice boys. They were nice people, and I'm glad I was brave enough to reach out and do that. Ultimately, I ended up marrying a white man, and our daughter is an amazing, fair-skinned, freckled, redhead, curly invention of the creator. That's all I can say. And she's brilliant. She's beautiful and brilliant.
Trying to think. When I was little, I think one thing I struggled with when I was younger, around 4th grade, so I was in elementary, so maybe 3rd or 4th grade, is my hair. You know, being a mixed girl is a privilege. It is, but it's also very confusing, especially when you're young, because my hair, obviously, it wasn't straight. Some biracial people's hair is straight, but mine was not, has never been. It's very, very curly. And so I would have my white friends who, you know, were like, oh, your hair is like super curly, but can you straighten it? And sometimes it's like, do I need to straighten it? Like, is that a requirement to be cool? You know, and on the flip side, I did wear like braids, but I didn't wear all kinds of protective hairstyles, and I couldn't wear them for quite as long because my hair would get frizzier faster. So I think it was kind of strange when I was younger, just because I didn't know a lot of mixed people. And so my hair was distinctly different from my Black friends and my white friends, just different, you know? And so trying to find yourself and how you fit in as an elementary school kid is a little tricky when you just start to notice like, oh, I'm a little different. So that's something that's challenging. Another thing that's challenging is, so I'm 22 years old, and what I've noticed is that I did not have a lot of biracial mentors. So, for example, if you're Black, it wouldn't be terribly hard to find someone who's older than you who's Black. If you're white, it wouldn't be terribly hard to find someone who's older than you and is white. However, because biracial marriage or interracial marriages weren't even legalized until the Loving versus Virginia Act, which wasn't that long ago. You know, it was in the 1960s. So yes, there were biracial people before the act, of course, And as the interracial marriages were slowly allowed, people have began to get married and have children, but the population of biracial people in America is smaller, and it's specifically of white and Black people. It's growing, but it's still small. And so I've noticed that it's hard for me to find and feel like I have mentors who are biracial and identify as biracial and are older than me, because the generation before mine, and especially the generation before that, even if they were biracial, they were conditioned in the 1960s through the 80s, really, to, if you were a person of color, if you had any Black in you, you're Black. It was based off of this one drop rule. And it's the idea that if you have any Black in you, you are Black. So there was no identifying as biracial. So even if I encounter some biracial people who are older than me, it is very rare that I will find someone who says, oh, and I'm biracial. They'll say I'm Black, which I respect it and I understand, but it was challenging for me because I wanted a mentor who said, oh, I am biracial, and I embrace both the white side and the Black side of me.
I think that though we're living in a really challenging time where everything seems crazy and so much racism is coming into view again, and domestic terrorism has finally been shed a light on. Though it comes with such heaviness and great responsibility, it also comes with a great opportunity to make real change in the world, and to really keep the foot on the gas pedal with regard to keeping these issues in the light, in the forefront, and waking people up to who they are, who they've been, what they've been taught by their parents that wasn't necessarily true. And I'm not just talking about white people, I'm talking about Black people too, what we've all been taught and how we come together to heal as a people.
So I think when two things. One, when you're mixed, you have to face things that, people who maybe don't have a multitude of ethnicities, races, and cultures that make up who they are, things that they don't have to deal with. So for one, I would just encourage anybody out there who's mixed or biracial to just love yourself as you are. It's very unique to identify this way, especially in today's day and age, but the world is only going to become more mixed, and there are going to be more and more biracial kids, and so that's kind of exciting. On the other hand, just also understand that we still have a necessary voice in justice movements, and we need to be very aware of how our actions and what we do and say affect our individual communities, while simultaneously balancing that with also finding our own voice and voicing our own struggles. And so I think that is just it's a very unique place to be in, but I believe it can be done. And I think it's our responsibility to be true to who we are, but also be true to the communities that we come from too. So, yeah.
Biracial. My blood is a battlefield where blue and gray coats clash under star-spangled banners and barred flags. My body is a prison where amber eyes bear witness to war that never ceases, seizing minds, wreaking division. My being is torn in two by double forces without mercy. But my spirit softly whispers, there is no war within me.